About a month ago, we had the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction ceremony, and we all know what that meant. A ton of people getting mad on social media and elsewhere about it, as so happens every single year. The Hall of Fame has been controversial for what feels like forever at this point. From the controversy of some artists not wanting to be inducted, to legendary bands not getting into the Hall, and for the fact it's not really a Hall of Fame for rock and roll anymore, but for music as a whole. I thought it would be interesting to talk about it all in the video, going through the points that are so often put against it, and asking the question, does the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame really matter anymore? For clarification, I'm not talking about the museum side of stuff, as I do believe it's important to have a place where there is history and an archive of important material and items from rock and metal history, but more the actual Hall of Fame and inductees. Let's start by talking about the actual process it takes for bands to get into the Hall of Fame. A band is first made eligible 25 years after their first recording happened. Then, a body of rock experts, whatever the hell that means, will pick a selection of bands or artists that should be in the Hall of Fame, which is then voted upon by a committee of about 500 rock historians. To say this system is heavily flawed is a understatement. Why should only a small group of the elites get to have a say of who gets in and who doesn't? Personally, I believe that either a full system of public voting for bands would work, or, in another sense that gives them still some control, the public should at least get to vote for which bands make it out of the original nominees. To be fair, this is not an issue that is just faced by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, as a lot of award shows such as the Oscars and the Grammys have these issues as well, causing for scandals such as the famous Metallica snub for Injustice for All at the Grammys. But it's still an issue nonetheless. As much as I don't agree with him on much, Kiss singer Paul Stanley said it best in this CNN interview.
If I've done anything, I hope that I've shown people the little man behind the levers in The Wizard of Oz, because the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is not the hall of the people. It's a small group of guys who decide who they want and who they don't, and then they decide what the rules are for you that don't apply to anybody else.
This is because it causes there to be a heavy bias in what type of bands get to be in the Hall of Fame, and which ones don't, which gets us onto the main complaint of the Hall of Fame for most people, that bands that get snubbed. Bands getting snubbed in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is about as common as finding a Confederate flag at a Pantera concert. So many bands from across the rock and metal genres that should have been inducted, or even nominated at this point, are absolutely nowhere to be seen. For one, there's the issue of non-rock acts getting into the Hall of Fame, which, while the argument could be made that some deserve to get in, I think the Hall should still remain predominantly rock and metal, or at least heavy music as a whole. The amount of snubs that have happened in the Hall of Fame could make this video go on for about an hour, so I'll point out some of the ones that I think are the most egregious, and of course the most headlines. Deep Purple only first got nominated in 2014, despite the fact they've been eligible since 1993. This is heinous considering, along with Black Sabbath, they're often considered one of the godfathers of heavy metal, and one of the most influential bands in heavy music of all time. Equally as bad is Uriah Heep, who, despite being just as influential with their early work being extremely heavy for being a late 60s band, have never even been nominated. Probably the most famous example of a band not being inducted into the Hall of Fame is Iron Maiden, who have still never been put into the Hall, but it's not like they would really want to anyway, with Bruce Dickinson saying, "If we were ever inducted, I will refuse. They won't bloody be having my corpse in there." It took until 2023 for metal legends Judas Priest to get in, and for showing how much they snub stuff, especially on the metal side of things, not a single extreme metal band have been inducted, despite many being eligible for years, with bands such as Death, Venom, and Bathory not being inducted despite being some of the most influential bands in history. This all shows the heavy bias that the Hall has for hard rock and metal, which, at least for me, really downplays its credibility when only the elite get to choose who is going to be in, and it's so obviously tailored to their own personal tastes and popular bands, not those that are the most influential. However, this gets on to my final point, which is if the Hall is so anti-art and obviously doesn't care about the actual music history and just wants some money, why should we as a community care at all? To say the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is greedy is an absolute understatement. The bands you are seeing on the tables and getting inducted aren't there for free, but in fact have to pay a lot of money for the privilege of getting to be inducted. This was revealed by Steve Miller. He was inducted as a solo artist, despite the fact that most of his most famous stuff came when he was with his band, the Steve Miller Band, and he was only given 2 tickets to the show, meaning that none of the band could even attend the show, despite the fact they were instrumental in getting that music into the hall in the first place. They were told they would have to pay $10,000 a ticket for any other people that would want to get in, which, at least in my opinion, is an absolute joke, as these people deserve to be in the hall and get their recognition just as much as anyone else does. Also, as revealed by Johnny Rotten in his very famous letter to the hall when he refused his induction as part of the Sex Pistols, showed they would have to pay $25,000 to be able to get a table to be at the show, which is an absolute joke. These bands shouldn't be paying for the privilege to be inducted into your Hall of Fame. They should be able to go there and be celebrated for free. However, my main thing that I feel about the Hall of Fame is, why do we still care about it? Rock and metal have never been genres that need the validation of those in the elite. In fact, we're quite the opposite most of the time. Bands like Black Sabbath and Queen were hated by critics, but became legendary based off their fans of the cult following they had, based on how good their music was. Yes, it is nice to see these bands finally get the recognition they deserved and be celebrated. And yes, there are still some really great moments in the Hall of Fame, my personal favourite being the reunion of KK Downing with Judas Priest in 12 long years. And after it seemed like personal differences would just have never made it happen. But for those fleeting great moments, people will still go on social media and complain every year for which bands didn't get in, or which bands got snubbed. Well, why should we care? We don't need for some uppity members of the elite to choose who gets to be seen as legendary and who doesn't. That's what we're here to do. If they think that mainstream sellout acts are more worthy of being in the hall than genre creators such as Helloween and Death, then why should we act like they have the credibility they think they have, when in fact they have none? An induction doesn't mean anything. It's a needless tag of a band's career that have so much more that needs to be celebrated. But what is of most importance to bands is their fans, and how they see them, because they are actually who care about the genre. We are the ones that spent our lives listening to these bands, buying their records, finding those in the underground, helping build up legends that would never be recognised otherwise. And that is what I think is most important in the sands of time, rather than what a couple of elites have to think. I want to cap this video off with Rush's legendary speech for their induction, as I think it perfectly sums up what we all think of the Hall.
Blah 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 blah. Blah 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 blah.
But now I hand it over to you. What do you think? Do you think the Hall of Fame still has credibility and is a good thing for music? Or do you agree with me that as rock and metal fans, we should for the most part ignore it as it has no real meaning? Let me know in the comments below and try to keep discussions as civil as possible. Make sure to like and subscribe if you've enjoyed. Follow my Insta, Twitter and Blue Sky and my Album of the Year page for all my latest reviews. All the links are in the description below. But with that, stay safe, stay happy, and stay metal!